So what does a lyric from the rapper Ice-T have to do with this summer's Mbappe saga? Let me explain. And in fact, actually, let's go back to the start of this whole Mbappe saga. 2016-17 season, Mbappe and a group of unlikely youngsters steal headlines across Europe. Mbappe, alongside his teammates, storm Ligue 1, winning the title on 95 points. During that season, they announced themselves on the continent, reaching the semi-finals of the Champions League, beating the likes of Manchester City and Borussia Dortmund along the way. Now, this was a star-studded squad featuring the likes of Bernardo Silva, Fabinho, JaackMaate and Radamel Falcao, but one name was being talked about the loudest. An exciting Parisian-born forward who had only been promoted to the first team a year prior. Kylian Mbappe Lotin was an enigma, an unknown, a player that nobody outside of France knew of, but a player everyone would want desperately in only 6 months' time. August 2017, and PSG sign Mbappe, but was it to protect fragile egos? Monaco were the victims of their own success in many ways over the summer of 2017 due to their players being ripped away over and over again. But the biggest question was who would dare sign Mbappe? The eye-washing cost of the forward would see almost every single club in the world priced out, apart from two: Real Madrid, see where I'm going here, and Paris Saint-Germain. Because of Real Madrid's interest in signing the forward, it may have forced PSG to push the Mbappe button a lot quicker than they wanted to, only 3 weeks after signing Neymar, in fact, for a world record fee. And this might have been one of the most consequential decisions for PSG in their history. And here's why. When they began their affiliation with Mbappe, PSG set their stall out that he was their crown jewel and that they were willing to overshadow Neymar, who they'd signed for a world record transfer just to bring him in. And this pushed the question of who the true big fish was at PSG. And fast forward to 2021, and Mbappe had gone on to score 132 goals for PSG and picked up a World Cup on the way. He's one of the best players in the world, and of course he's so young as well. So this means that a club like Real Madrid are going to have interest, and it's simply not going to go away. And Florentino Perez comes out in a Spanish TV interview and says that Mbappe will come to Madrid. This is easy to say, of course, but the question then becomes, when will he sign? In June 2021, PSG make a mistake. They treat Mbappe as an asset and not a person, really. PSG president and chief executive Nasser Al-Khelaifi comes out and claims that Mbappe is not for sale despite a £200 million bid coming in from Real Madrid. Now, was this the biggest mistake Al-Khelaifi could have made when it came to Mbappe? Because PSG didn't even respond to the 200 million bid. They stood strong, which I understand, but did this provoke Mbappe a little bit? Because maybe he felt like his decisions were being made for him, and that's just something in 2023 you can't really do anymore. Maybe back in the 80s, okay, we've got a bid and we've said no or we've said yes and off you go. But not with the best player in the world. And this is something that he has gone on to show that he just does not like people making decisions for him. And we'll get exactly to that in a minute. October 2021 rolls around and there are still murmurings of Mbappe not being settled at PSG. Is he beginning to be a pain at this point, or are his opinions valid? Mbappe's reasoning for wanting to leave was so PSG could get a fee for him for his sale. There are two interesting points that come from this. Firstly, it could be perceived that Mbappe always wanted and will always want to move to Real Madrid. And secondly, with what we know now, did this foreshadow how his plan was to always leave on a free and PSG should have taken the money when they could? 7 months later, in May, the biggest twist yet comes. Mbappe signs one of the most insane contracts we've ever seen in football that gives him boardroom level influence, and that leads us all to believe that there is no way that he'll ever leave, right? But there was one question that we all should have been asking. In a world of bumper long-term contracts, why only 2 years? Was this incredibly short-sighted from PSG, or did they feel like during that 2 years they could easily convince him to stay for longer? Or did Mbappe make one of the shrewdest moves of all time by taking this deal, as it gave him an exit in 2024? The way the contract was structured meant that it was a guaranteed 2 years with an optional extra year in Mbappe's favour. The signing of this contract alone is now causing havoc in 2023 and could shift player power in either direction. We'll get to that in a bit as well. So Mbappe signed a new 2-year contract last summer that included a 12-month extension clause for the 2024-25 season. However, only Mbappe can trigger that extension, not PSG. And the deadline for doing so is July 31st, 2023. But the salary isn't even the craziest thing when it comes to this contract. PSG actually gave this exact deal to Messi in terms of having 2 years with an option of a third. They've given their two most high-profile players the ability to screw them over massively here. So when the PSG Ultras, the board and the manager turn on these players, what do you think they're going to do? October 2022. Mbappe knows the power he has in his value and speaks against Galtier publicly. Mbappe starts to stir the pot at PSG and poke the bear with Instagram posts that can only be described as extremely passive-aggressive. That's coming from someone who's been married for 5 years. It's fine she doesn't watch the content. The term pivot gang, was almost the phrase of the month in October 2022, and it was introduced by Mbappe. Yes, I can't gloss over the fact that I just went gang, okay? I won't do it again. Yeah, I can't see how I'll do it again. The gift of the pivot gang was given to the world by Mbappe, who took to social media to voice his displeasure of being played as a single striker when he believes he should be an inside forward who does not have his back to goal. You could argue that this was an insight into the character of Mbappe and how he views himself in terms of importance, but also of how he views PSG and also how he knows himself despite being a young man. It does pose the question though that would he have done this at a club like Real Madrid, and would he have done this if he didn't have the contract that he had just signed? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. Get involved. There's so much to discuss when it comes to this saga. So off you go. Off you pop. I'll be reading them all. December 2022. Real Madrid walk away, but strengthen their position infinitely. With Mbappe's disillusion at PSG seemingly escalating with every passing week, Real Madrid do the smartest thing possible. In December, Real Madrid call their interest. With Marca reporting, and I expect this is a direct translation because it does sound a bit clunky, Real Madrid follows its roadmap, and that does not go through reopening the door of the entity to the possible arrival of Mbappe. The club's leaders want to get away from the noise. Yeah, Real Madrid don't want any noise. Nah. By disassociating themselves with the saga, they almost guaranteed that the pressure was on PSG, and that siege mentality could not be reached by the Parisians. This meant that the Mbappe microscope, which we're coining here at JLA, so, you know, like if Mbappe's got pivot gang, I'm having the Mbappe microscope. Copyright. This meant that the Mbappe microscope was on them, and that any minor infringement in Mbappe's direction would be enough to push Mbappe closer towards the exit door. Or at least that was the plan. April 2023, and Mbappe goes against the club again! Who is this guy? And surprise, surprise, it only takes 4 months for this to happen, but what angered Mbappe so? Well, in April, Mbappe was left angry with the club after they made a promotional video trying to convince their fans to renew their season tickets with Mbappe as the poster boy behind it. Which makes sense when he's a contracted player and he's still got another year on his contract and you're hoping that he's going to sign a new one, right? Mbappe does what Mbappe does. He takes to Instagram again to voice his opinion. It's his profile. He can do what he wants. He says, I don't agree with this video posted. Now, if all's rosy, why wouldn't he agree? Was he always planning to leave and was using him as a marketing tool to convince fans to renew, which seems like an obvious thing to do, a step too far by PSG? Or did they even know this? And was it a ploy to kind of hook him in again? Well, it looks like they didn't, but they should have always known. Not the PSG media team, but the PSG higher-ups who gave Mbappe an exit opportunity in 2024. One person who always knew was Kylian Mbappe, and there is one piece of proof that proves it. June 2023, and Mbappe throws a live grenade, not literally, in PSG's direction. I mean it metaphorically. June means one thing, transfer season, that's right, and there is no coincidence that this is when Mbappe decides to drop the news that would shake PSG to their core and cause unbridled chaos at the club whilst in a transition period of their own. On the 12th of June, Mbappe shocks PSG with a formal decision not to renew his contract in 2024. This sets off alarm bells. Again, not literally. at PSG because it means that this is the only chance they have to make any real money on his sale. Mbappe knows he has PSG where? Right there in the palm of his hand. This is possibly the smartest move a footballer has ever made. He's never said that he wants to leave this summer. All he said is that he won't renew once his contract comes to an end in 2024. You sign a contract to a deadline, you're going to be there, I'm going to be here, but only to that moment. It's so interesting that in football, for so long, you never expect to get to the end of your contract or you renew by the time you get there. So that puts people's noses out of joint. But in fact, you're just doing what you said you were going to do. He is perfectly within his rights to do this, and you can't really feel sorry for PSG as they've allowed this to happen with such short-sightedness. Or can you feel sorry for PSG? Has Mbappe gone a little bit too far here? Let me know in the comments down below. One fascinating bombshell is that the date on the letter sent to PSG by Mbappe was actually dated 2022. So this means that once the contract was all agreed, he immediately planned his future, and he has always had this as his intention. So you can feel sorry for PSG here. Has Mbappe led them down this merry road when he always knew his intentions? But again, isn't he perfectly allowed to do this? If he wanted to be really bothersome, he could have waited until the transfer window was over, right? Let's put it this way. You, PSG, bought these egos. So why are you surprised when their egos come out? You made your own bed, PSG. July 2023, PSG can't do this anymore. Well, it's hard to feel sorry for anyone at the minute because it's turned into a war between both parties, with PSG finally not trying to bow down to Mbappe and being stern with him, which is maybe what they should have been doing in the first place with all of their players to avoid this egocentric, sociopathic team that they've built that seems to cripple managers. So what has happened? PSG are convinced that Kylian Mbappe has already agreed terms to join Real Madrid in 2024 on a free transfer. They wanted an answer from Mbappe if he was staying or not by the 15th of July, but nothing came. The end result is that he's now considered up for sale. But it doesn't stop there. I know! PSG have left Mbappe out of their squad for their Japan tour. You really have to feel for Japan football fans here. They are the most unlikely victims of all of this. The whole tour was branded around using Messi, Mbappe and Ramos. Now none of them are going to be playing on the tour. And Mbappe now joins a list of 6 players made to train in exclusion. This list is comprised of players not deemed part of the project anymore at PSG. Wijnaldum, Paredes, Draxler, Diallo, Dagba and Kylian Mbappe. Is this incredibly unfair given the performance that he's given the club, or are PSG well within their rights to show that no one is bigger than the club, despite doing the opposite for the last few years? So what does the rapper Ice-T have in common with this Mbappe saga? Well, September 1999, Ice-T releases a song, and that song's called Don't Hate the Player, Hate the Game. That phrase is attributed to him somewhat. Of course, it was a phrase that was used prior to that, and it talks about a faulty system and the idea that you shouldn't hate people that abuse that system, you should hate the system itself. And so the bottom line when it comes to this, and I think it is this, and I've given Mbappe heat in videos previously, but I've kind of focused on the system, I think. But today, in 2023, the bottom line is that don't hate the player, hate the game. PSG feel wronged. Well, you're a nation-run state who have blown up football, and you've spent so much money that for you to compete, you yourselves have to be owned by a nation state. They spent 1.18 billion euros since 2016. They expected to have the best players and the best trophies, and here we are in 2023, no Messi, no Mbappe, no Champions League, and a newfound desire to bring in young, hungry prospects. Ha! So yes, Mbappe is a troll. Yes, he wants to play for Real Madrid and he's done PSG dirty. But before we go in too hard on Mbappe and his team, let's remember in a game where money talks, free will remains. And sometimes even $1 billion deal isn't enough. Don't hate the player, hate the game. And this player has something that at 24, with your prime years ahead of you, has something money can't buy. A vision and more talent than anyone on the planet. PSG are fair game. They've always been the bad guys. Now it's time for an anti-hero. Less than 24 hours after recording that video, and Saudi Arabian side Al Hilal now want to pay PSG 259 million, a world record of course, for Kylian Mbappe to go to Al Hilal. Outrageous, incredible, unregulated, and the gaps get bigger and bigger and bigger. Now you see this kind of thing at the lowest level of semi-pro football, where whichever club has the most money, they'll go and take everyone's players. And that continues and continues. But the gap that occurred from Chelsea and Man City to the Crystal Palaces to the QPRs of this world, that gap in financial might, from down here we were looking up and going, that's insurmountable. Well, now we have those clubs who had all that money. They are now going to be unable to keep hold of their players because, again, you take another level up and there's this another huge gap to the Saudi Arabian team. So if you're annoyed about it, it's something that's been going on for a hell of a long time. Is it right? No. Should it be regulated? Yes. Can they even do that? I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below. But there is too much money in this sport. And the bigger the gaps, the poorer the domestic competition. The poorer the domestic competition, the closer we get to that Super League.